Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity to come back to our market program. And today we are having a very interesting researcher and also professor as our visitor. And we are going to be talking about development also concerning the institutions of prosperity in Africa, but we shall also have comparative way with Asia. And we are so grateful that today we are having Professor Chris Lingle from United States. Is a professor, but is also having a bias in political economy. Is also a researcher with many institutes in America and also in Asia. Is also a visiting professor at the University in Guatemala. Yeah, so Chris, we are so grateful to have you here in Uganda. And we, first of all, appreciate you've been speaking to some forums. You are part of the Africa Liberty Camp, and we are so grateful that you're here in Uganda. You may greet our viewers and also be able to speak about the little time or the few days you've been in Uganda. You are welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, Chris, we are going to look at you in Africa, and this is not your first time. And you've been able to move to Asia, you've been able to do research, and you've seen that you've done research in the emerging market. And as Uganda, but in Africa in general, we have a saying that the 21st century was supposed to be for Africa to merge and Africa to grow and Africa to dominate as far as the economy is concerned. But we are seeing Asia taking over the 21st century. So what is bringing that difference? Why do you think Africa is not yet able to lift its people out of poverty, give them a better life, live longer, and also be able to enjoy their life?
I think it's a quality of leadership and public policy primarily. What we see in Asia, although many of the countries in Asia were former colonies, for example, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan, Korea, they were all colonies. But they were able to escape from the kind of devastating public policies that kept their people poor. Korea was the poorest country in the world at the end of World War II, poorer than all of Africa. And now it's one of the dominant players. They began with a feudalistic society that had been colonized by Japan for many years. But I think part of the problem is they understood that having a greater opening to free markets was a way for them to advance. In much of Africa, the leadership focused on democracy as a goal of their sort of political project, rather than economic freedom and human liberty and human dignity as the proper goal for every government. So there was actually a lot of the Asian countries had dictators. Certainly Korea had a dictator for many years before it transitioned. Taiwan was run by the Kuomintang, which was a dictatorship. Indonesia was a dictatorship, and so on. Now, but what happened is that they eventually, the leadership decided, we must be open to the world. We must let the world in and let the world discover what we have to offer so that we can specialize in exporting things that other people want. And this is the source of their wealth.
Okay.
And I think it's really public policy. People are not poor because there are too many people. That's nonsense. China has more people today than they had before, and they're very rich. People are not poor because they don't have education. It's not a problem. Education is not formal education through a schooling system is neither necessary nor sufficient to be economically advanced. Cuba has the highest rate of literacy in Latin America. There are no jobs. People are poor because they don't have jobs. People don't have jobs because there's not enough new businesses. There are not enough new businesses because governments don't care. They overregulate, they tax heavily, they make private property insecure, they don't take care of the physical infrastructure to make markets work better. governments are so involved with pretending to be democracies that they've lost contact with the real purpose of democracy, which was to deliver secure private property rights and to promote human liberty.
Okay. Yeah, Professor, you've talked about public policy and also the governance. If you look at Asian country, I would say Singapore, which you've talked about. Singapore and China, if you look at the quality of their governance, and if you also look at how human rights is taken, but still having a dictator, having this kind of governance which do not open up space for the rights of the people, but still the economy has been able to grow.
Yeah.
And in Africa, we have some countries which changes leaders. We have also some countries with dictators. But still we see even some worst countries in Asia with governance growing. But in Africa still, even where we have change of leaders, we have failed to see the progress we are seeing in Asia. What special thing the Asian tigers, for example Singapore, had with Lee Kuan Yew being a dictator, but still being able to lift the people and giving them what they need?
Yeah, democracy can play out in two different ways. You could become like the way India is. India, and I think much of Africa, it's convenient for the political leaders to have poor people because poor people depend upon them. Poor people always come to them, please help me. So they never want you to become rich because you don't need them as much. And this is what the Chinese, they don't have democracy, but they realized that they had to let the people become rich or they would rise up against them. So it's perverse. On one hand, democracy creates incentives for politicians to keep their countrymen poor, whereas a communist dictatorship like China was, the people were so poor they realized that if they didn't let them get rich, they would overthrow the government. So democracy doesn't necessarily provide us with good economic outcomes, and dictatorships don't either. But we have seen that in some cases, China was better off with a dictatorship in terms of material advance than India was with democracy. So we have to be aware. The incentives of democracy induce politicians to do the wrong thing. That is, to keep the people poor. And they look after themselves very well. And they're not punished because no, this is democracy. You chose us, so you have to pay. So you have to pay their pensions, their cars, their offices, their special hospitals, their VIP convoys, and you are second to them. So they put themselves above you. And this is a real problem. I mean, this happens in...
Professor, that takes me to the institutions which give people prosperity, or which let society prosper. I would like to know, with even the audience there, which institutions has China, Singapore, Malaysia gotten right, and we are not yet getting it right as Africa?
Well, again, they focused on economic freedoms, even if they didn't deliver political freedom. If you think about it, Hong Kong was a colony.
Yeah.
People didn't have political freedom, but they could become rich. Why? Well, the economy was open. Singapore it had a democracy, but with a single-party state, but they gave enough space for people to enrich themselves because they knew that was a way to secure the sort of the power of office by letting the people get rich. That is the biggest idea. As far as I can tell, the African leadership doesn't care if they keep people poor. If they open up your economies, you have some of the most intelligent people, you have so many young people, you have lots of hands, lots of brains that would move Africa forward. But you're being blocked. Nobody wants to be poor. Nobody wants to be poor. But if they're kept poor for a long time, there has to be some institutional barrier to keep them from improving themselves. And those are policies. They're, again, tax policies, licensing requirements for opening businesses, high taxes, or, again, arbitrary decisions about who can participate in particular activities. You've got to get away from this. People have to understand, in Africa, I believe, that liberty is what you need, not democracy. If democracy doesn't deliver liberty, it's failed you.
Yeah, exactly. You've brought in the democracy, and I see always many young people on the street in different parts of Africa saying we need democracy. I have seen the political parties all having democratic alliance, Forum for Democratic Change, Democratic Party, all of them, their number one goal is to look for democracy, to see that democracy is given. But then I wonder, why is it hard for many of them to know that it's not democracy, it's liberty?
Yeah.
And many of the leaders here seeing democracy, we are now in a democracy. But what is making it hard for people to appreciate the liberty we need to people to be prosperous, for people to get their dignity? Why is it hard to integrate the liberty into what they agitate for?
Yeah. I think part of it is the transition from colonialism.
Yeah.
Now, the African liberation leaders only had one answer when two answers were needed. Colonization was not necessarily bad because it was foreigners that had political power. The fundamental problem is there was too much political power. The liberation leaders took the exact political power that the colonial governments had and kept it for themselves. Now they missed the boat. They missed the point. The point was that Ugandans needed to be free. Not that you needed to be free from British colonial power. You needed to be free from political power, whether it was from a Ugandan or from a British. They didn't get that message. And of course, it was convenient for them. They they live in the same houses. They use the same powers against you.
Yeah.
They use the same ways of suppressing dissent or opposition. So they only delivered on half of the promise. They gave you national sovereignty, but they didn't give you individual sovereignty. Individual sovereignty means you're free without the opposition of political power to be able to achieve your life purposes and to do what you want to do.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Individual sovereignty versus national sovereignty. I see many people were jubilating. Uganda got its message in 1962, and I remember the stories we are told by our great-grandparents and the grandparents, how they were celebrating. Mm-hmm. And many of them thought that this was the beginning of a new era in their lives, in their families. And as you've said up today, we have even a certain part of the population saying maybe the colonialists were better, and we are still in that conundrum. But to come back to our institutions, which we are having, in Africa, we still have a certain debate about the opening of the economy and the free market economy. In 1990, our leadership opened up the economy through the IMF substructure adjustment programs. But still we have many people saying that IMF agitated for the opening up of the economy. But still, with all these structural adjustment policies, we have not been able to let the economy have the full participation the people. But economy is favoring the elite, those who are connected to the power, those who are able to have one hand in State House and one hand in the private sector. How can we be able to open up an economy which is going to offer equality to everyone as a country?
Unfortunately, you have to rely on your leaders. And what happened with loans from the IMF or from the World Bank, most of it probably benefited the government. That is, they expanded the capacity of government to have power, to use power, to carry out policies that would secure their political base by supporting certain interest groups. But the whole country is indebted from that. And the primary beneficiaries are the political parties, or the political leaders and the bureaucrats, the people that work with them. they don't have an interest in providing you with the tools that they just need to get out of your way. But they don't want to get out of your way. They need to be in your way, so you have to pay them to get them out of your way, whether it's the traffic policemen who take a bribe. Everybody knows they do. Traffic policemen do nothing for traffic here. They're just there to take bribes. Everybody knows that. You see them, you say, am I going to be stopped? It's really difficult to break that. It's like a cancer in your body. Corruption and this sort of desire for political power is really a cancer that's holding back this economy. And you've got to find a way to break that. I don't have a magic formula, but it's only when that happens that you'll begin to see remarkable advances in this country. And it will happen overnight. Look at the short time that it took from Singapore to be a dirty backwater, no place to go, sort of little city-state, to being one of the most spectacular and beautiful places in the world. It took very short time. And you see that through a lot of Asia as well.
Yeah. That's great. And I think it's a question we are having. I think we have lagged behind for so long. We have not been able to, even within the 60 years plus of independence, we still grapple with the same problems. And we are wondering, the Asians are trying to get out, even though we are more poor. And I would like to bring also this issue of having wealth in Africa, natural resources. Recently, our president said that we don't mind with all the money we are borrowing. We are going to start drilling our oil. We have gold. And the shift in the country, there is a paradigm shift where many people are now excited that the natural resources are going to be able to lift the country from the third world to the first world. So I would like you to tell us, as an economist, and be with even some example, how are the natural resources going to be able to lift us? And should people be able to think that natural resources is what we need to get Africa?
The only way that the natural resources will be exploited in a commercial and economic way to make people rich is if government gives up the rights to what we call subsoil extraction rights. Now, as far as I know, I may be wrong about this, but I suspect that Uganda, like most countries, with the exception of the United States, government, you may own the surface land, but the government owns whatever is beneath the land. And you have to apply for a license or whatever. In America, you buy the land, you dig a mine. Now, if they were sincere, if they really wanted natural resources to enrich the country, they would relinquish that power. That would be the first and most important thing. Now, every country in the world has natural gas. You just have to go deep enough. If you have to wait 5 years to get a license from the government to drill a well or to dig a mine, nobody's going to do that. It will never happen.
Yes.
They want to extract as much wealth from the people who want to come to invest for themselves, and there'll be too little left for you. You've got to find a way to impress the government that if they really were sincere, I mean, and this is a message to give to people here. If your government is sincere, they have to give those rights up and let people that own the land take whatever's beneath it.
I come from Uganda and I've lived here and I know the laws and whatever. I don't imagine government leaving the natural resources to people, because even today, if the government discover that under our studio there is gold, there is then immediately government will say this is a natural resource, and it will consider it into the natural resource envelope. They will disperse you. But then also, I also think that we have a poor population, and even most areas where there are natural resources, they are the most vulnerable people. We have a place called Karamoja, where they are the most vulnerable. And if you let the resources, the mineral belong to them, how long will they take to get all the capital to extract and make them useful?
Again, the way to empower them is to give them secure private property rights. Then they can lease the land. They don't, or they could sell the land, but they could lease the land, or they could lease the mineral rights to the land. Say, okay, I give you the rights. If you find gold, you have the gold. I give him right to oil. You find oil, but you only have gold. You don't have oil. So you give them power. If they own that property, and if they're allowed to take whatever is beneath it for themselves, they can lease it to someone, and the people with capital will come in. They keep the land. They can keep farming it, depending on the type of mine, depending on the well. I mean, some of the wells in the United States are as small as a room. They take up very little space, and they go very deep in the ground, kilometer and kilometers into the ground. So you don't even have to give up much land to give up the mineral rights to the land, to transfer the mineral rights to the land. And you could do it, say, for 10 years, okay? You have 10 years to extract gold. After that's finished, it comes back to me. Then we renegotiate, 5 years, whatever. Same with the oil. You've got 5 years to extract oil. After that, we renegotiate. So this will give those vulnerable people power. Now, of course, if they're simple farmers, it may be someone like you that will go and be a broker. So you'll say, look, I'm going to try to take care of you. I'm going to get the most I can out of these foreigners that are coming to explore for minerals, and you'll pay me a commission. New job has been created.
Yeah.
You hire secretaries because you need some help. Yeah. And it's the way economic activity develops is quite remarkable. So, we're saying, we have to protect the vulnerable. Let the vulnerable protect themselves. Give them property rights. Give them protections against the abuse of political power, and they will probably be much richer than they would have been.
I see. That's great. And another aspect I would like Professor to tackle on is the aspect of, in Uganda we have a new policy and a new campaign which is called Bobo, Buy Uganda, Build Uganda. It was 82% when they made research that many Ugandans think that the best way to create wealth, the best way to prosper, the best way to develop is to produce what we consume. And even the government designed its policies for export promotion and to close the import because they think we spend too much. If you look at what we spend on buying vehicle, it's too much. But still, this is my testimony when I visited one of the local company making a vehicle, making a kind of car, Tesla electric car. The car is very expensive, more than what we get from Japan. And I would like to know, how could you tell the senior economists whom we have, who are still believing that we should be able to design an export promotion kind of strategy and close the import?
I would tell these people, if they think that boo-boo is a great idea, then they think colonialism is a good idea. The reason I say that is that colonialism was motivated by a belief that the European countries should not buy from other countries. So one way that you don't buy from other countries is to own those countries. So they went across the world and took over other countries. So whenever they bought and sold, they were buying and selling from themselves. So the logic of buy Uganda, build Uganda, is the same logic that motivated colonialism. So if you think, you have to be consistent. If colonialism is a bad idea, it was a bad idea for many reasons. But one of the reasons is that it went against economic logic. If you are a country, you must discover through trade what it is you do best. Uganda is not best at creating cars, at building cars. Korea is much better. China is much better. Japan is much better. Okay? That is not what you should produce, because if you waste resources building an expensive car that only the rich will be able to afford, you want to be able to import the cheapest, best car that everyone can afford. And maybe they can't afford a car. Maybe it's a motorbike. So the idea of export-led development is a myth, and it's a dangerous myth. People believe that Japan succeeded because of that, but Japan succeeded because nobody was competing with them. After World War II, Japan had export-led growth, but China wasn't competing, the Soviet Union wasn't competing, Africa wasn't competing, most of Europe wasn't competing because they were destroyed after the war, Latin America wasn't competing. Japan had everything to itself. And they built a little bit. What happened to Japan? Well, Southeast Asia said, we want to export. They destroyed Japan. Japan's economy collapsed in 1989. The East Asian economies took off. They did well until China came along. They collapsed in 1997. Now, China tried to play the same game. And the only reason China has succeeded is that central banks around the world have created so much liquidity and debt that we were able to, it's like a pyramid scheme, a Ponzi scheme. We print money, we give it to the Chinese to buy their products. They buy our bonds or, some of our raw materials. And it's just, but it will end one day. China's attempts to, and see, they had to come to you to build a highway because they can't build enough at home.
Exactly.
And when they come with money here, they create debt for your country, this magnificent highway that costs $497 million, I think, almost $500 million. You have to pay it back in 40 years. Now, it's the most expensive, I looked it up. The normal cost per kilometer of that kind of road is roughly $2 million a kilometer. And here, I think it was $9 million. So the order of magnitude of what was lost, and that's not difficult terrain.
Yeah.
That's very simple terrain compared to what we have in many places in the United States. Never costs that much money.
Yeah.
And the labor in America, by the way, is much more expensive. So I think, you really need to rethink these ideas. It sounds like a good thing. Even Donald Trump has this idea that making in America again. Yeah. It does not work. It impoverishes people. If you make a political decision to build in your country and buy only what is made in your country, the consumers will be poor.
Okay.
If you want people to be rich, open the economy to imports, open the economy to capital, reduce regulation, reduce licensing, reduce taxation, secure property rights.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor, for that. It has been very interesting. Yeah, everyone up to now realized that the highway was so much expensive, not because it was built with these gold glasses.
Yeah.
It's the same, but the bureaucrats took a lot of money, hopefully, and what China also took.
China in this part of Entebbe and to talk to people, to see how real people live. Politicians are detached from the reality of your daily life. So they don't really care about the continued misery or poverty or underdevelopment. They are too busy meeting important dignitaries, ambassadors, people that are having the best clothes and they're having the best meals. This is completely detached from the reality of the daily life of Ugandans. It's not fair. Now, of course, he won't do it. I mean, it's not because they've become very important people. They've become VIPs. They believe they're above. I mean, the people have chosen me. I'm above the people. No, you are the servant of the people. You must be accountable to the people. But they've created institutional arrangements, police, army, laws, that keep people away from them. This is a real problem with politicians.
Okay, thank you very much, our audience and viewers there. We are so grateful to have you. We've had a very great time with Professor Chris Lingle. Yeah, we still have a few days with Chris in Uganda, and hopefully we are going to be able to converse and also discuss. So thank you very much. Your last word. Chris. Yeah, thank you very much. We're so grateful.